It's physical, emotional, psychological, and it's spiritual. Taking care of the physical part, in many cases, is the easiest thing to do. And now I have to face the world, and I have no coping skills. Hello, my name's Ken Seal, and let's talk addiction. Okay, so far in these videos, we have determined that addiction is, in fact, a disease. We have taken a look at how professionals actually determine whether or not people have an addiction using the DSM-5 and the MAST test. We have also discussed the progression of addiction. So now I want to take another look at addiction, which quite frankly, I really like this approach to it, and it's called the holistic approach, okay? So many people feel that if they can get control of the physical part of their addiction, that they got it made. That's all they need to do. I just got to quit drinking, quit drugging, and I'll be fine. But quite frankly, that's not true, because the holistic approach discusses the fact that addiction has 4 parts. It's physical, emotional, psychological, and it's spiritual. And it would much like be the wheels on a car. You know, if all the wheels on a car are inflated properly, you're going to have a smooth ride. However, if you have one tire that isn't completely taken care of and inflated properly, the ride's going to be bumpy. And in my opinion, that makes sense. It's not just physical. There's an emotional component, psychological, and spiritual component. All right, I'll use myself as an example. When I got sober, when I quit drinking years ago, I quit drinking because I was afraid of dying. And I took care of the physical part. I quit drinking, quit drugging, nothing's going into my body, and I'm doing fine. And I went about 3.5, almost 4 years. And so I took care of the physical part. But quite frankly, the rest of it, the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual part, I was a mess. And I was a mess simply because the only way I knew to cope, the only coping skill I had was alcohol. Now I got rid of the alcohol because I didn't want to die, but alcohol was the only way I knew to cope. So now I don't know how to deal with my emotions. I don't know how to deal with my psychological issues or my spiritual issues. I'm a mess. And until I actually started looking at all 4 of them and working on all 4, I didn't get any better. Okay? So we're going to talk about each one of these individually. We'll start with physical. We're going to start with the physical component. Now, the physical component, basically what we're doing here is this. We're talking about a chemical imbalance in your brain. Your brain is a bunch of mush and blood and chemicals, okay? 2 main chemicals in your brain that are affected through addiction would be dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine gives you motivation, gives you feelings of accomplishment. Serotonin makes you happy, makes you calm, allows you to focus, okay? And just to make it simple, we're going to say that 50 is the normal level for these 2 chemicals. And when you're doing things that tend to be things you like to do, the dopamine and serotonin levels will rise from 50 to, say, 100, okay? So, you know, playing a sport that you enjoy. I love to play golf. When I play golf, my serotonin, my dopamine levels rise, and I feel good, and I feel like I've accomplished something. If you're a parent or grandparent, you're playing with your children or grandchildren, the same effect. It raises these levels, and it makes it, and the more you do it, the better you feel, okay? Sex, hey, you love sex? Same thing. It raises these levels, and the more you do it, it raises the levels, you feel great, and so you want to keep doing it, okay? So this is a normal reaction. It goes from 50 to 100, okay. Now, here's the problem. When you start abusing drugs and start pounding extra alcohol and drugs in your brain, in other words, more chemicals, what it does is that it raises these levels of dopamine and serotonin to really high rates. So let's go from 50 to 1,000. And when you do it, it feels so good that you want to keep doing it, okay? All right, now, so what happens then is, imagine the guy that owns the dopamine factory in your head and the serotonin factory in your head. he's looking at this situation and he's going, and he calls up the foreman of the dopamine factory in your brain and says, look, this crazy person is just pounding all these extra chemicals in our head, in our body. So we really don't need to keep making all that serotonin and dopamine. So you know what? Lay off the graveyard shift. You know what? We probably could lay off the second shift too. Now what happens when that happens is that you're now going to create the chemical imbalance. When the person comes to down the road, what he's going to find out is that instead of having a normal level of these chemicals in your brain, instead of at 50, it's going to be at 10 or 20. And so how do you feel? You feel like shit. That's how you feel. You feel terrible. And the only way to get back to 50, back to quote unquote normal, is to in fact use the drug, use the alcohol. So what you're starting to build up now is tolerance. I got to get this stuff just to feel normal. The other thing that happens that's kind of crazy too is that because you're pounding all these extra drugs in your body, your brain will develop more and more receptors because they got to absorb all this extra dopamine and serotonin. And so they do that. Now, so again, when you come to in the morning and your levels are really low, not only are they low, but your receptors are going, I want to get filled up. So again, you're really pounding on the tolerance. Okay? All right, so I'm trying to keep it simple. Basically, what you've done by using these drugs and alcohol is you're creating a chemical imbalance. And it's messing up the way your brain works. And the more you do it, the more you need just to feel normal. And the more you do it, the more tolerance you build up, and you need more and more just to feel normal. And in fact, quite frankly, you're never going to feel normal again. The point here is quite simple, is that obviously we need to take care of the physical part. And there are all different ways of looking at that. I'm basically an abstinence-based guy, and we're going to discuss abstinence and how you go about that is when we get to how do we fix this stuff. Another thing that's becoming more and more popular is medically assisted treatment, whereas people are taking drugs to help them deal with their recovery, deal with their withdrawal symptoms and their cravings. And again, we're going to talk more and more about that. But the bottom line is this: you can do everything you want to help with the physical, and you got to deal with the physical. But if you don't deal with the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual aspects of addiction, you're never going to get better. You're only going to be doing part of the job. And quite frankly, if you talk to a lot of people in recovery, which I have over the years, is that taking care of the physical part, in many cases, is the easiest thing to do. Because now, I'm not drinking, I'm not drugging, but now I got to learn how to deal with life. And I don't know how to deal with life because all I've ever done in the way of coping is using alcohol and drugs. And now I have to face the world, and I have no coping skills. They talk about the fact that your maturity level will basically stop at whatever date you started abusing drugs. So, and in most cases, most of the guys I worked with have started abusing drugs in their teens. So basically, they may be 35 or 40 years old chronologically, but emotionally, they're stuck in the teenage years. And they don't know how to deal with life because every time something bad happened, they drank or drug. Every time something good happened, they drank or drug. And after a while, they just drank and drugged. And they have no way to cope with it. So there you go. So that's the physical part that we need to deal with. Next time, we're going to talk about the emotional part. So I'll see you next time. Cheers. Hi, my name's Ken Seal, and this is Let's Talk Addiction. Now, if you like what you've seen and you think it can be helpful, and I believe it can be, I've been helping hundreds of people for years, hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll keep these coming. Thank you.